Why lighters? Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us with the currency that is your life. We have a treasure in exchange for your time. One of our favorite people, actually the foundation of the revolution of thought. We're doing a full 180 on the standard narrative that was Helter Skelter as advanced by Vince Bugliosi through his ghostwriter, Mr. Gentry, who had a very similar story a couple of years earlier, coincidentally. So instead of adapting a crime to a story, you figured out the story to the actual crime. And that has been a watershed for the telling of this story. There's pre and post George Stimson, ladies and gentlemen. Mr. George Stimson's joining us. Woo! Author of Goodbye Helter Skelter, most famously. Thank you, George, for joining us.
Glad to be here.
Wonderful, wonderful. So I want to thank you first for addressing things in your book that were so complicated for people to get their minds around. We've spent so much time, even here on this show, we're guilty of giving a lot of time to the LaBianca murder and the Tate murder, not dealing with the second night, as you did in your wonderful book on Peace and Hall Press, Goodbye Helter Skelter, where you did address Charlie's culpability, certain things he was guilty of, certain things that other people had done, but then you laid it out in a way that was understandable, and that if justice had been administered rightfully, we might have had a completely different outcome in the incarceration and ultimate death of Charles Manson. And so for that, we as researchers really have the pre and post Goodbye Helter Skelter. So thank you so much again.
Well, you're welcome. I just wanted to find out what happened myself, because when I read the Helter Skelter version of the murders, I knew that couldn't be true, but I knew there had to be something that was true. So I searched and searched and searched, and came up with the conclusion that it was the copycat or get brother out of jail motive is the most true, the most believable. There are other theories out there, but I think that's the one that has the most evidence supporting it, even though it is flawed in its conception, certainly not a good plan, but that's what people do. And people don't, it's easy to sit back when you're older and reflect and say, well, I wouldn't have done that, or I would have done that. It's easy to judge what other people would do in a situation that you're not in, and you can't really do that. So you have to kind of give these people, not credit, if you will, but understand that their thinking wasn't as clear and concise as a lot of people who are looking at the case.
Absolutely. And much is made of their intoxication. Whereas for me, I think you were just about to touch on the fact that they were pretty hopped up on normal chemicals that are happening in teenage and post-teenage bodies in the form of hormones and natural free-flowing chemicals. So these people are not criminal masterminds.
No, not by any means. And I think you're right. At that time in your life, 19, 20, when you're just becoming an adult and getting out on your own, there's a lot of different things going on. It's a certain period of your life, maybe, like I say, 19, 20, maybe up to 25, where there's a lot of options that you have and things you can do that you weren't able to do when you were a child, and experimenting and meeting new people and getting out on your own. So it's a special time, and those people were in that special time.
It really is. And I think you're emboldened because of these hormones, because of this feeling of being invincible. And then I've observed it myself. I don't know if you did when you were younger, but being in group settings where the behavior kind of ratchets up because so-and-so did this. And like for me, it was the motorcycle club world where, you're working your way through the ranks of being a club officer, and it's through your deeds. And it's very almost like Native American, where you count coup, and it's a form of honor. And I think there was some of that happening. And I always have to slow down and look at that. And I think you did a wonderful job of that in the book and on your podcast. And if y'all can do yourself the kindness of tuning into George's fine podcast, which is, of course, Goodbye, Helter Skelter. Now, come on and do it. We'll have some links on here, of course, but you have to also understand a lot of the foundation of what we talk about here is through the lens of what George has researched and had cooperation through who we feel are the important researchers on this case, and why we sometimes come off very sympathetic to the actual quote unquote Manson family members. And I think it's because we try to go beyond the suffering of the victims, which is very obvious and in the forefront of all this, and get into the motivations of these young people.
Well, and another thing is not just the suffering of the victims. There are so many people that have been affected by this, the killers' friends, people who are loyal to them. They've all been affected by it. So I think when you get down to it, you should look at it very seriously and try to figure out what happened and not put out a bunch of speculative stuff that doesn't really have anything to do with the case, because there are people out there who are affected by this today, and they tell lies, and you know, whatever they say people did, that's what they did, and people accept it without anything like evidence or corroboration. So the bottom line is you have 9 dead people. How many people lives, quote, ruined, unquote, by going to prison? There's a lot of disruption here on all sides, not just for the victims. So I think you have to take it pretty seriously.
Absolutely.
I mean, I do admittedly try to inject a little humor into my podcast when the chance arises, but
we love that.
Yeah, I hope it's kind of subtle and maybe makes people think, what did he just say? But it is at the bottom line a serious thing, and it shouldn't be trifled with too much.
Now, George, I was first introduced through you through Manson blog, actually.
Okay.
And some of your fantastic articles that you've written on there. And then I got into watching you on your podcast and really learned a lot from you, and just your dedication to the case and your friendship with Charlie over all those years. But more recently, in the last 5 years, I've just really come to appreciate you more as a person, as I think a lot of people do, of just being someone genuine, very down to earth, and approaches this case from an honest point of view. So
Yeah.
I just appreciate you.
Well, I've tried to be straightforward from the beginning. I've always been George Stimson. Anywhere you look on the internet, that's who I am. I'm not any other name. And
Thank you. I say the same thing, and everyone thinks I'm doxing people. No, it's just I don't have time. I have a 9-year-old daughter, and I'm married to a redhead.
Right.
I'm working on a lot of female frequencies. I can't deal with usernames and weird Decepticon accounts. I don't have time for that shit. David.
It's nice to have
just
an
call
idea that
me.
you might be interacting with someone who's an actual person.
Yeah,
exactly.
And not the fifth personality of some other person who's got a bunch of Facebook accounts or whatever hidden identities they have.
I don't like dancing with schizzos. It's not
and I don't want to spend a lot of time
Sure.
even answering a question for somebody who has a internet name or whatever. Like I say, I'm George Stimson, and that's who I am.
Absolutely. And I really appreciate that. And it comes through in the genuineness of the tone in the book. Again, there were some really complicated questions that I think you tackled really well. And we've been looking at some of these other theories. For me, the first time I came across a really nice concrete version for myself researching after I'd come in custodianship of the Frommie collection was the Death to Pigs book. It was the transcription, and Blue and Nancy were explaining it very well and very succinctly. And that was the first time I'd seen it in print, because I was trying to come up with when the first time people had actually heard that, and Blue had said it fairly immediately.
Yeah, very early. Yeah, I have that book. I haven't read it a lot. I have so many books on the case that I haven't read, because when I read them, they just reinforce what I already think. So it's,
Mhm.
you know, I've never, in all my journey on this of trying to find out what really happened, I've never really hit a stone wall that said, nope, you're going in the wrong direction. It's always been, yeah, come on, check a little more, look over here. What does this person say? What happened there? And
Right.
it's always reinforced, you know, my original theory. That's like when I redid the book, I updated some of the stuff as the status of the people, but I didn't really look around to see what everybody's saying about everything, because it's just reinforces what I already said.
And so what year was the first edition published, and what year was the second?
The first one was 2014, and then the fire burned up half my inventory,
Oh.
so I had to come up with some new ones. When
Oh my goodness.
I think it was one of the anniversaries,
Mhm.
2019.
Yeah.
I came out with the second version. What? All right.
Yep.
But yeah, two editions of that and two editions of Lynette's book, also Reflection.
Yeah.
Well, the impact of that book, I think, was palpable for the reader. I think it was very interesting the way it was introduced, and there was a lot of confusion about that. I found that very interesting.
Which
That
book is this?
Reflections,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
or Reflection rather, that you were thinking a more standard release, having some publicity, getting it out there, really wanting to market it in a normal fashion, seeing how many people would want to read it, how many people would be positively affected by it. But then I guess Lynn wanted a more grassroots approach,
No,
apparently.
that's not true. I didn't want to do that at all. In fact, I told her, you know, we'll publish your book, we'll publish it the way you want
Okay.
it, because if you go with a regular mainstream publisher, you're going to
Mhm.
get screwed. It'll be
Absolutely.
the biggest
They'll
mistake you ever
chop
made.
it up and
And
go
I said, and
crazy.
we're just gonna announce
Right.
it, and then word of mouth will do it. We're not gonna advertise
So you did
it.
agree on
Yeah,
that.
we're not
Okay.
gonna do anything. My whole theory on everything I've done is
Interesting.
I put it out there. If 10 people see it, then 10 people see it. Well, I put it out there.
Well,
If that's the only
dude.
people who wanted to look at it, then I can't
Right.
help that. I'm not worried. I
So
don't count looks or likes or any of
that's
that
Yeah.
stuff.
wonderful. So
It's
that
there.
was an organic ground up decision. That wasn't a thing that happened later and it was like, oh, that's a twist.
No.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
What a great way to get it out there, because everyone I know independently who
Yeah.
has it,
Yeah.
still excited by it. And a lot of them, like Casey, they were passed on. People
Yeah.
keep reading them and reading them.
Yep.
And
Mhm.
people don't want to hear that when they're being selfish.
Mhm.
But you know, people like you, I can really tell who love something, because you, like Lynn, want to share the story.
Yeah.
Hey, if people feel excited and generous, like, hey, I'd come into some money. I loved it. I bought as many copies as I could to give away,
Mhm.
but I know other people couldn't and they gave them away. So
Yeah.
it's an organic way of having it happen. That's
Yeah,
wonderful.
you just put it out there and people see it or they don't. That's all
Speaking
you can do.
personally, I think it's a must-have for everybody that's serious about the case.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Those
and
two.
if you have a special hankering to see Vincent Bugliosi get his just desserts, George does a good job of that
Mhm.
as well.
Well, we really appreciate it. And then the get the brother out of jail motive is really buoyed by, like, what you were saying earlier in terms of what has been written in the wrong direction.
Mhm.
It really seemed to reinforce Goodbye Helter Skelter when I've been reading just wild claims like Rosemary LaBianca was supplying LSD to Jay Sebring and bringing it up to Cielo. And when she didn't show on the night of August 8/9, 1969, is when the bloodbath was unleashed by Tex Watson and his murderous cohorts. It's like,
Mhm.
over some asset. How did that?
Well,
She's worth 20 million today's money. Is that about right? Or 12 million or 20 million or something like that?
I think it was $20,000 worth, and it's worth $170,000.
Right, but it meant
then-
Rosemary LaBianca was worth
Oh,
2 million, so probably like
yeah,
12 million.
I
now.
consider the LaBiancas to be totally random victims.
Right.
So I don't look into any of what money they had, or if Lino was stretched thin with his finances. Who isn't? You know,
Right.
And just because he's Italian doesn't mean he's in the mob.
Yep.
Just because his wife's got a dress shop and it doesn't seem like it should be making money. You know, I knew a donut shop on Union Avenue in Union Street in San Francisco. I don't know how they made money. Cupcake shop, excuse me. So who knows? You know, you can't say, you don't look at the pictures of Rosemary LaBianca's house or the credit cards in her wallet and think this is an acid head. But, you know, maybe she's a professional. It's just ridiculous. You
When
know.
I read that, I just couldn't get through a certain book that was going in that direction. And so when you have this breakdown of some of these facts that have been thrown around, and again, when people do that and they only tune into one or two shows here and there, and the more lurid, exciting, memorable things jump across the screen, that's what the public is left with. And then we who are trying to research and have the fair story come off as like Manson apologists or something, because what they've done is just muddied the waters and trying to understand things. Now, Casey, you had focused in on a couple of things that you found very interesting. Now, could we bring
I
that
like
up?
that George just looked at all the police reports and studied those materials. I wanted to ask you about, so we're very familiar with the love of brother, but like, what about this theory that more recently I've heard, love of sister? Like it was, they wanted to get money to get Sandra and Mary out rather than Bobby. Now, George, with the love of brother, that is a very well-known theory at this point. A lot of people, you know, have read your book and talked about that over the years. But more recently, some researchers have been talking about a theory that I think kind of goes along with what you're saying, possibly, but I want to get your take on it. It's this love of sister theory that possibly they were sent to get money that night to bail Mary and Sandra out of jail. What do you think?
Again, I don't know when the call was made to the ranch that said, hey, we're being arrested. I know that Sandy spent one night in jail and was released, so that doesn't sound like it would be too much of an urgency, considering how often people were getting thrown in jail for 6 days or a week or whatever. I think that's quite an extreme way to go to murder 5 people to get bail money when you could maybe hold up a liquor store or something. I mean, I don't know what her bail was. You know, it was a weekend. I don't know if they'd, you know, gone to court and had bail set. There's a whole lot there that I've not looked into that because it just doesn't.
That's a fine point.
It doesn't
Now,
make sense.
she had been arrested about how many times at that point would you guess?
Who?
Sandy.
Oh, I don't know. 4 or 5 or 6.
So a handful of times.
All short.
So yeah, once you've been arrested the 3rd time,
Yeah.
you pretty much know the procedure. If you get released within 24 hours, it doesn't really mess with you that bad. You don't like it.
Yeah.
But I went through that as a teenager, you know, shoplifting or weird little, you know, just arrest me crimes. And I think, yeah, that is absolutely something we like to slow down here on the program. Twilighters, take that in. She was out rather immediately. George Stimson just stated for the record, how is that a motive to murder 5 people in one night? I concur. Thank you very much. We can just put a cork in that. Now,
And it was Mary that ended up having to stay in for quite a bit till I think mid-September.
So do you think the baby would be the reason that rumor, true or not, would stick around?
I don't know. I from what Nancy Pittman said in her testimony is that the Friday morning, August 8th, she went down to the jail to try to see how much bail would be for Bobby. And they said, no bail. This is a murder, you know? And so that's why I've kind of entertained it, but I don't really feel too strongly on it because, you know, I think it's pretty apparent that everything that happened on Friday night was a failure. That they didn't come back with the money that they were supposed to, allegedly, right? So I don't know.
And they didn't make the copycat plan work too well either.
Yeah.
The police did notice similarities, but not to the extent that they wanted to. And, the similarities they noted were just that, well, maybe Bobby had accomplices, which was what was really true. So that wasn't
was
the
like it
most
was gonna
brilliant idea.
getting him out.
Yeah.
And then, so yeah, there was a couple of facial slashes that were allegedly, similar. And I don't know how true that is, but yeah, there was a lot of that. And it failed miserably. And that's why the second night in your book, I found it riveting, Twilighters. In George's book, the account, it just made the hair stand up all over my body. You really captured what I believe it would have felt like coming up in the Schwartz car, Charlie exiting, going up the side of that driveway into the side door of that home. You really,
Yeah,
man.
well, you could. That's what he told me. That's what he told me happened.
Oh.
And anytime Charlie told me what happened, I didn't accept it blindly. I would go, okay, well, let me check it out. Would that be possible, what he said? And I looked into that, and it was perfectly timed to Linda Kasabian's Half a Cigarette. The time he had to go up and do all the things that he said he did. I went here, I went over there, I jumped over the fence. I went in the door, it was unlocked because Lena let the dog out. I walked in because the house was vacant when we were there before. Oh, there's somebody in here. I'm gone. See you later.
Right.
Yeah.
Some of the girls testified in the trial, and take that for whatever you worth, but that they actually had conversations on Thursday night about we got to get Bobby out. And so this is prior to Charlie and Stephanie Schramm even coming home back from San Diego. So it seems like this was in the works, and this might not have even been Charlie's idea.
Oh yeah, definitely not his idea. And I think when he heard about it, he said, I'm not signing on to that. That's for sure. So, and plus, he had done enough. He had taken care of the Crow situation. There's a lot of debt going back and forth, if you will, because everybody at the ranch thought that he had killed Crow to save the ranch status quo.
Yeah.
So that was the level of commitment there. That was the bar. And so,
Now, again, Twilighters, we got to slow down. That right there, this, I think, is the gore point in logic where either you're a real researcher and you can keep running down this path, or you can't. Because that logic, can we just fill that out a little bit? Because Charles Manson, as the alleged figurehead of this situation and the focal point of it, has ostensibly taken a human life to make sure that everyone there is physically safe. He's invested in the tax money with George Spahn. He's tried to be as responsible and resourceful as he could as a felon, as a person of zero civilian experience. So for this guy, he's being, all intents and purposes, an angel, right? And then this comes down, and these kids, mainly Leslie Van Houten, I'm told, came up with this kind of true detective.
We saw it in a movie on TV kind of thing.
Exactly what she said in a letter that I read from the early 70s, that Leslie had basically confessed all of it. And that's the logic you get. So you had spent so much time with Charlie. This must be ridiculous for you to think that he would have come up with a plan like this.
Well, Charlie was really, I guess you could put it separate. He was his own person. He wasn't involved in other people's business. It's something he learned in prison. And whatever you're doing, and whatever I'm doing. And just because we're together doesn't mean I have anything to do with what you're doing. And you're doing what you're doing, and I'm doing what I'm doing.
He said that quite a bit.
Well, that's how prison logic works. And you guys, again, either you can understand that and see that it's common prison logic. This isn't him being racist or crazy or lying and hiding blame. That's just how it works. Again, he was a prisoner. He was a convict. That's all this guy knew.
Yeah.
So of course he was operating that way.
And another thing is that's one
sense.
thing I didn't talk about in my podcast about the drug burn narrative, is it about him going back to the house to clean up after what he's like, I got nothing to do with this. I'm not going back to the house to clean up for what they did.
Thing. Right.
I'm out of it. So I don't see that he would say, oh, I better go help my friends since I left myself out of it. Why don't I go over there and leave a bunch of evidence that shows I was there? The whole thing about going back, it's just not.
No,
It
or
didn't
get
happen.
caught not just by law enforcement, but other people. If it was such a big dope dealing house, who else is going to show up there? And you're there with a bunch of dead bodies, like, oh, hey, just check it out.
Yeah.
Just decided to come up here and throw these glasses out here and start scrubbing the carpet. So the movie actor guy doesn't have to do it with the Life magazine, dude. We'll save the psychic some trouble.
Yeah.
I'll just turn myself in.
Did you ever have a conversation with him about that?
Exactly.
I did ask him about that, and I just with Charlie, I didn't really ask him questions. We were doing things. We were doing whatever we were doing. He would come up with ideas, and can we do this, and can we do that, and can we do that, and can we do this, and that's mostly what we were doing. And I wasn't really questioning him about the case,
right.
But occasionally you'd be there, and I'd say something like, we'd be playing cards or something, and I would just say out of the blue, by the way, did you go to the Tate house after the murders there? And he just said no.
Yeah.
And I figured, well, that's as far as that's going. So, it wasn't.
Well, for me, that's up there with the pornography. Like, if there was pornography, people, we would have seen this pornography by now.
Well, I think you would have seen that. You've had a lot more people saying, yes, I definitely know that Jay Sebring was dealing drugs because I bought them from him. And, not just I heard this, there's no evidence of that. There's evidence that he liked drugs and he shared drugs, and there's evidence that Boyd wanted to deal drugs, but the evidence is all there. The evidence is all there in the police reports. There's nothing covered up. All these things that are supposed to be covered up, the big clues are all in the police report. Joel Rostow, he's in the police report. All the theories, they're in the police report. We talked to Tom Harrigan. We talked to Billy Doyle. We talked to all these people. This is what we found out. We checked them out. They were cooperative with us. We said it's like I say, homicide detectives, they want to solve homicides. They don't care about anything other than that.
Thank you.
It's like, well, where did he get his drugs? We don't care. We got the guy. We don't need to know where he got his drugs. That's up to narcotics. Send it over to them. They'll really appreciate it.
It's a union gig. You gotta stick to your job, man. Stay in your lane,
They're
babe.
not like investigative reporters. Like, well, I wonder if, where did that MDA come from? It's irrelevant. I'm a cop. I'm a homicide cop. I got to get this case solved. I got 8 more to do with. So,
I got the press breathing down my neck.
Yeah, that's an issue of police procedure that you have to know about, having read many hundreds of books about police procedure, as I have.
Absolutely.
Now, some people have stated that they believe that your book is similar in theory to some of the things that Susan Atkins said in her second book.
Yep.
What is your opinion of the myth of Helter Skelter?
Well, the original title of my book was going to be The Helter Skelter Myth, so I didn't like that. But no, I agreed with that because somebody sent me that book and said, well, she's saying exactly what you're saying.
Yeah.
And I read it and I said, well, she certainly is. Now, she's got a lot more manipulation going on with Charlie than I have in my book and that I think happened. Charlie, according to people looking back, and maybe they've had counseling or something and gone into, well, how could you believe this guy? They say all sorts of things like, Charlie a problem would arise and Charlie would say, well, what do you think we should do? And rather than wondering, what do you think we should do? Oh, he's trying to draw you into his world of, and get your opinion and bring you into it. And it's all this super psychology.
The thing that can't help itself with this case.
Yeah.
It's like French fries. People have to put salt on them.
I know.
They have to do it. They have to put their little twists on it because in the telling of it, you want to participate. Is what I think I've witnessed in people. They somehow, in regurgitating their version of it, are somehow participating. Do you feel that that's a thing people want to do?
Well, I think they just want to blame him. They make him out to be like he's just constantly 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, conniving mastermind, figuring out how to screw everybody. Anybody he
like laser eyes burning you down.
Sure, he's a convict, sure, but he's not doing anything out of line, or I
Well-
kind of, when they say he's a criminal mastermind.
Yeah. I just keep coming back to that, hey, man, he just bounced out of jail.
Yeah.
Look at how sideways and crazy things could have gotten. And the whole thing about the people, like you say, who want to say things like Manson's murderous obsession with death would never be sated until he was safely locked inside the California penal institutions, which eventually took his life. They want to do that because
Yeah.
I don't understand the idea that it's so hard to accept the actual words that were said by Manson's disciples, his most faithful. When I read the words of people like Sandy and Lynette Fromme, I hear hopeful things that are from enthusiastic young girls with bright futures in their eyes. And what I hear from Charlie, and I want to get this from you, I'm starting to have this feeling that he was more of like a watering hole, that he was just very stationary, very stable, and that people came to him on their various levels. And because he was there and he sated them on some level in that way by, well, what would you do?
Yeah.
When you're a teenager, like when I
Absolutely.
met TJ, I was probably like 7 or 8. And the fact that he made eye contact with me and took us to the liquor store in his truck, and we got candy, and he didn't buy beer, and he stayed the same throughout the day and didn't get aggressive with us and paid attention. I'll never forget that. I'd never had an adult treat me that way.
Well, that is one big factor. I mean, Charlie was 10 years older than a lot of the people there, more than that. And I mean, I remember when I was in college, there was a guy who came into college late who was 26, and he seemed like the most brilliant person in the world.
Sure.
And one thing I was able to do with this when I first started getting into the case at about 1975, when I was 21, is to look at the age difference. Like, when you're 26, how do you view a person who's 35? And when you're 35, how do you view a person who's 20? And you can look at that and you get a different perspective based on your age. So you would look at somebody like Charlie, who's very engaging and charismatic and smart and clever and resourceful, and certainly you would give him a lot of respect and
gravitas.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, and he also, by him being there, I was attracted to naturally charismatic older dudes as a young guy because I can't speak for women, but my thing in group situations was, if a guy had a situation that was already existing, he had a network that was working, he had people there, it was positive. That is a whole bunch of security. For me, I was what they called a scooter tramp. I would be bumming around on my little motorcycle with a duffel bag, and that was my existence. So if somebody had a cool place to crash and we could come up on some food and there were some good vibes, we had some herb. Are you serious?
Yeah.
And then, of course, the guy's 35. That would have been my dad's age, right? Roughly at that point. I would have definitely been going to that watering hole. Now, do you feel he was just this calming ground for all these people because he was older and had love and forgiveness for them?
Well, I think that's a lot of it. I mean, he was treating them like they treated him.
So with compassion and deference.
Yeah, they showed him.
So he met them at their own level.
Exactly. Right.
So that's why the testimonies of a Diane Lake versus a Gypsy versus a Lynn Fromme may be at odds with each other.
Well, yeah, but that Charlie said
they met
many times, I reflect people back to them. So if you went to him with some kind of attitude, he would come back to you with that attitude. Your point of view, he would come back to you with that point of view. So maybe
like we hear from a Susan or a Diane Lake kind of situation. Got that. I understand.
Yeah.
I mean, my background, as Dave knows, is in biblical theology and stuff. My degree was in that, but in this case and Charlie, it's a tired narrative. that's been put out there about him being a cult leader and him claiming to be God and all of these ridiculous things. But I do want to say this, that in what we were just talking about, in the same way that the Sadducees and Pharisees hung Jesus by his words, the more you say, the more you put out there that they can try to hang you with. That happened with Charlie. He spoke a lot. That there's a lot of the things that he said that has been put on the narrative, put on the record by others that were his close friends,
and used weapons against him. Yeah.
And sometimes they're paraphrasing, sometimes they're misquoting him, sometimes they're not even understanding what he's talking about. But it all gets attributed as something that he said, So I think that's a little bit unfair. That I encourage people, as you do more research in this case, try to stay away from that. Try to take his words for his own. Try to hear it in his own voice or in his own writing.
Right. Interviews are the most important thing you can see when it comes to Charlie. Uncut interviews.
Those are amazing, and that's why we're always here on Twilight asking our viewers to slow it down. Take your time. We're not in a hurry. Read that chapter, paragraph, sentence, whatever it is that you glazed over or you went a little quick, because there will be sentences and reflections that just change the way I think about so many things. And there's a lot of great lessons in there. There's a lot of great parables. I think that's why he gets this Christ-like comparison. I think Jesus was a cult leader. I think people did die. There was a bunch of stuff. So those are the same terms that God applied to Charlie when he, on a smaller scale, as a criminal and as a societal outcast loser. I think he did really well.
In a lot of ways, though, I mean, Jesus is supposed to be an all man. So if Charlie's Jesus, sure, he's Jesus, and sure, he's God. He's all of those things. But it's not to say like I'm getting down on my knees and worshiping him.
Yeah.
Thank you.
To me, God is not some big man behind a desk with a beard and everything. I like to say atheists don't believe in the God that they believe in, but I think you can't say that. He was the Son of Man, and he was the archetypal human, and he got
crucified for it. That's what I'm saying. I refer to,
and I'm not saying, I think he's Jesus Christ.
No, there
was a Holy Roman Empire.
There's a lot of elements from Jesus's trial and the mockery of the justice system there, and what Charlie experienced. Going back to the age thing, Charlie was 32 years old, right? And Jesus was 30 to 33 years old when he started his public ministry. The disciples were anywhere between 15 to 25 years old. As we know with the family, that falls right within the age range of those people. So a lot of this stuff, you guys, it's not spiritual, it's not religious. It's just it's a blessing. It's a gift to have friends that are older that you can listen to and gain wisdom from.
And for a couple of teenagers going into their early 20s to come up with a harebrained plan when they were high watching movies, and one of their friends had done something that would normally be thought of as fairly unspeakable, that is not something I think you could attribute to the older person who'd willingly left town knowing there was some weirdness afoot at home. So that is the salient point for me. And that's where I want to start a story about the night when the babies left in the car to go up to Cielo Drive, because I think the involvement right there is going to be a big point of what you really, really brought home in Goodbye Helter Skelter on Peas and Hall Press. And that was that his involvement was oddly compassionate. As an older person who had seen some younger people take on some horrible decisions and responsibilities that couldn't be reversed. And then, yes, he was an accessory to a lot of things. But what was this person supposed to do in the moment? And that's where we're going to leave it with you Twilighters on this episode, because this is the story that just keeps giving. And I think if there's any compassion or humanity, you can look at any side of it and be completely fascinated.
We're going to have George back for another episode here. But before we go, I want to ask George, where's the best place people can buy Goodbye Helter Skelter for you? What's the best?
Go to goodbyehelterskelter.com. You can order directly from the Peace in the Hall Press, and they're all signed. So that's an extra.
That's
the
great.
same cost as Amazon, I believe, but that's the best way to do it.
And please,
goodbyehelterskelter.com.
Please check out his YouTube channel. You'll hear a lot more about this drug burn. I mean, not the drug burn theory. He's talked about the drug burn theory in his last episode.
Talk about, and look, that's exactly how it happens. If we had been a normal network, not here in the garage, that could have been cut so funny to totally reverse everything we said. And that's how they do the gotchas with the girls and the survivors in this case. That's hilarious. So thank you for that real-time thing.
Okay.
And we're going to thank you, George.
Okay.
And we'll be back again with George Stimson real soon. But Twilighters, thanks for tuning in and giving us your life.